Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so for those of you who are here, I'd like to welcome you all to our online lecture series for Assessment in Learning One. I assume that all of you here are my students. So if you are not my student, then you can still join us and learn something about assessment in Learning One. So this is a public video, so anybody can join us here. And you are more than welcome to join. If you can hear me, please let me know. Baka we're having troubles with our audio, so I might be speaking here and I, you can't hear me at your end, so please let me know if you can hear me or not. For those who will not be able to join, I hope next time you allot uh, data for your class here because my schedule is Friday. Of course, that's aside from the schedule which was given to you. Okay, so for today, let's just take a look at module number one. I know I have given you the module last week, and I told you to read the module, answer the exercises. But for today, I'm going to look into the module and maybe explain some parts of the module. Although when I went over the module last year, when we first used this module, it's actually self-explanatory and you can actually learn from it by just reading it. But for the sake of those of you who would like to clarify things, I'm doing this live for today. Okay. Before we start, I'd like to have an exercise first. I hope for those of you who are using your phones, you can close this browser and go to your Chrome browser because our next activity would require you to do that. Okay, so yeah, let's check out this first. So let's just have a short activity. Okay, so if you can see in your screen, can you see it on your screen? All right, so on your screen, it says there, go to www.menti.com, and then when you are asked to key in the code, use the code 70428748. Let me know, guys, if you can follow. Okay. Right, so I'm trying to type. So there you go. Go to www.menti.com and key in the code 70428748. Right, so those are the codes which you may use. So the question is, using one word, describe your experience in flexible learning for the past 3 semesters, English or Tagalog words. So we have the first word there. It says exhausting. How about the rest? I think that answer came from June Marla Desma. Sabi niya, done na po, sir. All right, how about the rest? Most of you are still saying good afternoon, so good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to my lecture series for Assessment and Learning 1. Okay, come on guys. Gawin nyo na to. I would like you to go to www.menti.com and key in the code 704-287-4 and answer the question using one word. Describe your experience in flexible learning for the past 3 semesters. That would include this semester, English or Tagalog word. One word lang. 4 words naman na to. Difficult because of poor. of poor connection siguro. So difficult maybe is a good word. Okay. So it says there, tired, intense, exhausting, connection, stressful, hassle, okay, difficult connection. Ayun, sabi niya. Mahirap. So what else? Okay, mga kapapasok lang, welcome to our live lecture discussion series. So we're having an activity on www.menti.com, and I'm asking you to describe your experience in flexible learning for the past 3 semesters using an English or a Tagalog words. So your answers are coming in. Anong ibig sabihin nitong word cloud natin? Yung pinakamalaki dyan, meaning most of you, yun ang sinasagot. So as of the moment, the biggest word there in our word cloud is stressful. So yeah, I share the same sentiment. So stressful on your part and stressful also on the part of your teachers, because like until this moment, like most of us are still adjusting to the new normal, even though if it's more than a year already. Yeah, because of some factors. One, of course, is yung internet connection. Hindi lahat tayo, meron tayong Wi-Fi. And not all of you have their laptops. And most of you are using their phones. That's really stressful, challenging. Some of you probably are tired already, it says here. Rugged, I don't know what that means. Entertaining, that's good, it's positive. Hassle, pressured, exhausting. Okay naman po, sir. So that's 4 words. Pressured, mahirap, hardship. Okay, so all in all, ang sinasagot ninyo is it's stressful, challenging, probably because it's totally different when you were inside the classroom. Kasi may mga nakakausap kayo, di ba? You are beside your classmate, and from time to time, you can talk, discuss things together. But this time, we are just glued on our cell phone screens, or laptop screens, or desktop screens. So, medyo nakaka-stress siya, and there's a lot of works to be done. Lalong-lalo na ngayon, ano? Dati, you can work collaboratively with your classmates, but now, most of the time, you work alone at home. Okay, so that's probably it's stressful and challenging. Yeah, it's really challenging. All right. So, ano pa bang hindi ko nabasa rito? Pressured, mahirap, difficult, rewarding experience. Yeah, it's if you try to look at it, it's also a rewarding experience. Yung mga naunang graduate sa inyo, they didn't experience this. Lalo na yung mga hindi na nag-aaral, they just working, and they are not working sa teaching, so they were not able to experience this. This could be a very good learning experience for you, because especially for you guys, dahil kayo ay magiging teacher in the future. So if this thing happens again, God forbids, then you already know what to expect, and you are already equipped, with the skills. in this type of setup. And besides, we've been talking about this setup long before the pandemic. Diba? Sinasabi natin, online learning is the best because this and that and stuff like that. Now, here it is. So, yun nga lang, may mga outside factors na hindi natin makontrol. So, yun yung naging problema natin. But I agree that it's a rewarding experience. And what else? Na okay naman na experience. So, yan. Okay, draining. Yeah. I think probably the reason why draining ito is, guys, if you'd like to explain yung words ninyo dyan na kiniin ninyo sa menti.com, you can actually go to the comment section or to the chat, comments or chat section, and try to explain that. And I will read it once I see your explanation if you would like to do that. Okay? So, yun. Draining nga dahil maraming trabaho. Okay? And you're not doing anything at home. Plus the fact that there's pandemic. So, you are worried about a lot of things and you worry stuffs that has something to do with schooling. So it's kind of training to be in that situation. Okay. But yeah, so mostly these are negative experiences that I am seeing on our screen right now. But like what I said, once we're done with this, we'll come out really strong. Okay? Kasi naranasan natin tong hirap na ito. And maybe if this will go on, this kind of setup, let's try to embrace it and adjust and think of it as the normal thing. Okay? In that way, hindi tayo may stress, we won't feel tired, pressured, exhausted. Okay? Because if this is going to persist for a long time, then we don't have any choice but to embrace it. Okay? So, yeah, I think that's it for this. So, thank you guys for sharing your uh, experiences in one word. Okay, and I can see all your answers here. Unsecured mental health, yeah. This uh one way of um helping yourself with your mental health is just to stay positive, to think, to try to enjoy learning in this situation. Okay? Huwag niyo isipin na pag hindi niyo wala ka ng pang-load dahil hindi ka na maka-internet, you cannot join the class already. Ayun. Then you'll feel bad about it, depressed, and you will do stuffs like harm yourself and stuff like that. Please do not do that. You know, just think positive and try to enjoy it and think that you are doing this because you have an ultimate goal, and that is to become a teacher. Okay? Kung hindi nyo ito kayang lampasan, hindi kayo pwede maging teacher. There will be more challenges sa buhay ng isang teacher. All right, so well, that's it. Thank you for your answers. So we start with our module, right? A lot of you guys are still keying in some answers, so just let those answers coming in, and then we'll go back later if we have time. So yeah, welcome to Assessment in Learning 1. This wait, stop ko lang yung cam ko at mag-share ako ng something. Ano? Wait. Okay, so let's take a look at our module. So assessment and learning one, just to give you an overview, this actually deals on assessment and evaluation. So we'll be talking about what's assessment, uh, the principles of high quality assessment. How can we ensure that we can come up with an assessment that is of high quality, that is valid, reliable, and what are the things that we are going to consider in assessing learning. Okay. And also, we will discuss the different modes of learning, okay, ways on how are we going to assess learning inside the classroom. And this is very important at the moment because um, when I've been doing this lecture for the past few years, except last year, the setup that I have in mind is of the face-to-face classroom. Okay, but things changed last year, and it is also very crucial for for teachers like me on how are we going to um, assess our students or students learning. How can we ensure that the test is quality, that the test suits the students, the test intends what it intends to measure, or the test measures what it intends to measure, and among other things. So medyo challenging siya. That's why it's very important that we need to discuss assessment and evaluation. Okay? Now, the first part of your module of of the entire course is just a review, actually, uh, of what assessment is, what is educational assessment, and among other things. Okay, so now let's take a look. Let's go over your module number 1. But of course, before we go to that, just like what I said, if you guys have questions, you can just type in your questions anytime, even when I am talking. And once I see them, I'm going to answer your questions. All right. So let's go. Let's talk about that part. So we have here the components of educational process. All right. So if we are going, it says here, if we are going, let me just read this one. If you reflect on your experiences in your class day by day over the years, you'd realize that there is a process that is going on and on. Okay. The educational process has 3 major components, and these are learning experiences, objectives, and measurement and evaluation. Okay. So in assessment in learning 1, our focus is on the third component, which is measurement and evaluation. But as a preliminary topic for the course, we're going to talk about your objectives also, because objectives is very crucial in designing tests. Okay. All right, so it says here measurement and evaluation is the last component, wherein evaluation is the end product of assessment process. Okay, so here you are being introduced on what is evaluation. So when we talk about evaluation, this is the part where the teacher makes a decision on what should he or do knowing the results of the assessment. Okay. So that's just a short description of what evaluation is. We're going to discuss that later. So in the educational process, these components are dynamic in nature. It goes on and on until such time that appropriate and relevant standards are being set and attained. So the teacher sets learning objectives or learning outcomes before the execution of any lesson where the learning process are made evident. The students' learning experiences should not end there without assessing their performance. So learning experiences happen before the proper lesson, during, and after the lesson. So before, during, and after, that's where the learning experiences occur. Same is true with assessment. We assess before, we assess during, and we assess after. Okay? So learning experiences happen. Therefore, assessment should take place before, ayun, sinabi ko na dyan. The evaluation drawn from the assessment will provide opportunity for decision making in terms of performance of students, which can be translated into innovation in the teaching learning process, in which assessment is again embedded. So, ano ba tong assessment? Ito yung exams. Ano? Recitation na ginagawa ninyo when you're asked to do a project, that's assessment. When your teacher asks you clarifying questions, that's assessment. Pag meron kayong prelim, midterm, finals, that's assessment. So now let's take an example of the quizzes. Quizzes is also an assessment. Pag sinabi natin quizzes, or even major exams, sometimes you guys wonder, what happened in your exam? Because let's admit it, may mga exams tayo na hindi natin nalalaman kung anong score natin. Never nating nakita na ibinalik sa atin yung ating test papers. Okay? So in other words, walang feedbacking na naganap. Okay? Pero pagdating ng submission ng grade, may grade naman kayo. So, sa quizzes, hindi pwedeng magpa-quiz tayo and then we keep the quiz na lang. Hindi na natin i-check. The reason why we conduct a quiz is because we wanted to know kung may natututunan ba yung mga estudyante natin doon sa quiz natin, doon sa lesson natin. Okay? Bakit? Okay? That's for evaluation purposes. So in other words, based from the results of the test, doon papasok yung evaluation. So malalaman natin ngayon, based from the results of the test, if marami sa mga estudyante natin ang hindi nakapasa, marami sa kanila ang bumagsak, okay? Which could mean na pwedeng hindi klaro yung lesson sa kanila kaya hindi sila pumasa sa quiz. Okay? Or yung materials na ginamit natin, instructional na materials natin, instead of the materials helping the teacher to explain more or better the lesson, medyo mas na-confuse yung mga estudyante dahil doon sa mga materials na ginamit natin. Okay? O pwedeng hindi klaro magsalita yung teacher. Okay? Or pwedeng hindi kasi conducive yung classroom, mainit, kaya yung mga estudyante natin, hindi sila masyadong nakikinig. And all those things will be considered in evaluation. So, without you checking the quiz, paano mo ito malalaman? Okay? Or even sa major exams, kung hindi mo chinek at hindi mo binalik at nagpugto-pugto ka lang, medyo delikado yon kasi paano mo ngayon mai-evaluate kung tama ba yung ginagawa mo? Okay. So we make use of these results to improve learning and teaching. Okay? Sa teaching on the part of the teacher. So napakalaking bagay itong assessment sa part ng teacher, not only on the part of the students. That's why ako minsan pag nagpapa-quiz ako at nagkokopyahan, nangongodi ko yung mga estudyante, nagagalit ako kasi kahit hindi na alam ng estudyante yung lesson, pumapasa siya kasi nagkodigo siya. And that will give me a wrong idea or will result in wrong evaluation. Kasi pag lahat kayo pumasa pero nangodigo pala kayo, iisipin ko na, naintindihan nila, wow. So maybe I'm doing the right thing. So magpo-proceed ako ngayon sa next lesson. Yun pala, nangopya kayo, nagkodigo kayo. So, magkakaroon ako ng maling instructional decision. That's why most of the time, your teachers would tell you na do not cheat, okay? O do not share your answers and stuff like that. Kasi importante yung result ng test sa amin. Which is equally important on your part. Kasi sa part ninyo, pag hindi maganda yung result ng test ninyo, you know that you need to catch up. Mag-aral pa. Effort pa ng todo. Okay? Or kung project, pagandahin pa yung project. Di ba? So, yun yung mga importanteng rason. Kaya tayo binibigyan ng assessment. Which, of course, is something na hindi maintindihan ng mga estudyante. Pag ganun yung teacher, sinasabi ng mga estudyante, napaka-stricto naman yan, OA naman yan. Di ba? But of course, yun yung rason. Now, when you will become teachers, you'll realize na, oo nga. Okay? How would I know if I am doing the right thing in the classroom if hindi ko naman chine-check yung quizzes? Or if yung mga estudyante ko, hinahayaan ko lang, nagkokopyahan sila during the assessment. So, yeah. Okay. Do you guys have questions at this point? Oh, andyan pa ba kayo? I think we have 113 viewers at the moment. Don't worry, I'll make sure na hanggang 1 hour lang tayo. I know a lot of you guys ay kotang-kota na sa online lectures for today. So I'll make this short as much as possible. Okay? So this is the relationship between the three components of the educational process. Okay, so nagsasalita ako, naka-off pala yung mic. All right, so we proceed now to the learning objectives and outcomes. So this is the second component. The vision, it says here, in this context, it is nice to relate the learning outcomes from that of the instructional goals, visions, and missions of the academic institution. Okay? The vision and mission statement of an academic institution state what it ought to be or what to achieve forever in the future. Kaya sa school natin, meron tayong vision, mission statement. Okay? It also states the dreams and plans of an academic institution in the future. This vision and mission are broad in nature. So to achieve such, this is cascaded to the goal of the college of an academic institution. In other words, meron tayong tinatawag na vision and mission ng school, ng university. And this is what the university ought to be or they want to achieve in the future. Ito yung na-envision nila and this is the mission of the university. Okay? But, of course, to be able to achieve that, since sa isang educational institution, nahahati ito ng mga colleges. Ano? So, meron mga tinatawag natin na vision and mission din yung mga academic programs, yung colleges natin. Di ba? So, academic programs, for example, sa BSE, meron tayong tinatawag na program goals. Okay? So, halimbawa, sa BSE, to produce globally competent professional teachers. Halimbawa, yun ang ano niya. Now, for us to be able to achieve that, okay, so in other words, from vision and mission, university level, then there's college level, then meron tayong program goals, and then, halimbawa ito, sa College of Education, ang program goal is to produce globally competent future teachers. Now, para ma-achieve ito, magkakaroon tayo ngayon ng mga specific goals. Okay? College ito. Ano yung mga specific goals? Dito naman papasok yung mga program goals. So, sa atin, sa ISU Ilagan, sa College of Education, meron tayong BSE, meron tayong BT-LED, BT-BTED, yan. So, yan yung mga programs natin. So, meron kanya-kanya mga program goals din. Ang program goals ng mga ito ay nakabase doon sa college. Okay? Na yung goals ng college ay nakabase naman doon sa vision mission ng university. So from there, to achieve or the goal, for example, goal ng BT-LED at saka goals ng BSED, para ma-achieve that, magkakaroon din tayo ng mga course goals. Okay? Yung goals ng mga subjects nitong mga programs na ito. Diba? So, kung makikita nyo sa inyong syllabus, meron tayong course goals. So, para ma-achieve itong course goals na ito, nakabase pa rin doon sa program goal, na nakabase sa college, na nakabase sa vision mission ng university. Now, to achieve these course goals, magkakaroon tayo ng mga specific learning objectives sa mga lessons ng mga courses or subjects. Okay? At yun yung tinatawag natin na mga instructional objectives. Okay? So, ito na. Instructional objectives are statements of what students will learn in a class or in a class session. These statements are focused on student learning. Okay? So, ang focus ng instructional objectives, what will students learn today? Okay? Rather than the instructor's teaching or what am I going to teach today? So kapag maggagawa tayo ng learning objectives natin, ang nasa isip natin is what will the students learn today? Hindi yung what am I going to teach today? Okay. In stating our instructional objectives, we make use of verb phrase and an impact, yang should be able to phrase, what students will do or be able to do, and how they will apply that skills or knowledge. It forms the backbone of the lesson, specific in nature as intervention to develop the specific knowledge and skills. Now, when you will be teaching, I do not know if this still applies in the basic education. They will ask you later on to make a lesson plan, or I do not know how do they call that already now. Or lesson log. Okay, pagagawin kayo ng objectives niyan, ano? Bago kayo makagawa ng lesson plan, first thing, of course, you should know your lesson for that day, and you have to state your objectives. Kailangan meron tayong objectives or learning objectives. So halimbawa, at the end of the lesson, the student should be able to, so notice here the verbs, define, discuss, illustrate, perform, solve. Those are verbs, okay, na ginagamit natin. So in our example, it says here, define fraction. So if your objectives is to define fraction, therefore, part of your lesson is to allow the students to define the fractions. Okay? So meron dapat ganon. Then discuss different types of and kinds of fractions. So gusto mo that by the end of the lesson, the students should be able to discuss the different types and kinds of fractions. So sa learning ang tawag dito, activities mo, it should lead towards this objective. It should help them to be able to discuss the different types and kinds of fraction at the end of the lesson. Also here, illustrate fractions, perform addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of fractions, and solve problems involving addition of fractions. So these are examples of learning objectives. Okay. So in writing learning outcomes, it is important to note that there must be corresponding questions or test items to measure knowledge and skills that is hoped to be achieved. The following are possible corresponding questions or test items to measure the above learning outcomes. So ito yung mga questions na pwede natin itanong. What is meant by fraction? What are the different types and kinds of fraction? How do you differentiate the different kinds and types of fractions? How do you illustrate fraction? What is the sum of 1/2 and 3/2? halves, how do you add fractions, and others. So in other words, sabi ko kanina, if these are your lesson objectives, ito yung mga pwede mong itanong doon sa test item mo. Okay? So, ang objective mo, they'd be able to define fractions. So, sa test or sa quiz, for example, pwede mo itanong ng what is fraction? Or what is a fraction? Or what is meant by fraction? Since ang lesson objective mo here is discuss different types and kinds of fractions, then you might as well ask them in the test, what are the different types and kinds of fraction? And you ask them to differentiate the different kinds and types of fractions. So there's an alignment. Kaya sabi ko kanina, it's important that you know how to state your lesson objectives because the lesson objectives, that's where you're going to lift your assessment objectives, which will become the questions, will guide you on how are you going to frame your questions in the test. So dito, define lang siya. So they should be able to define, like they be able to memorize what fraction is. So if you ask them what is meant by fraction, if they can define fraction and memorize it, then they can answer the question. Diba? So, yon. So dito, sa D, solve problems involving addition of fraction. So the question in the test would be, what is the sum of 1/2 and 3/2? Diba? So that's solving problem involving addition of fractions. Okay, so there's an alignment. Okay, so when you are designing your test, always refer to your instructional or lesson objectives. So, importante yon. We'll talk about alignment in the future, as we go along. So in some lesson plans or modules, they quantify kung ilang percent yung gusto nilang ma-achieve ng mga estudyante, ilang percent ng mga estudyante ang makaka-achieve doon sa objectives. So this is an example. At the end of the lesson, at least 75% of the students should be able to. So your target is that 75% of the students should be able to, for example, define fraction or fractions. But of course, ang pinaka-ginagamit is this. At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to. Yan. Okay? But of course, you can also do this if you would like to quantify kung ilang percentage of the students ang tina-target mo. Okay? So, yeah. May tanong po ba kayo? Regarding formulating instructional objectives, nasa ibang prof ed subject nyo yan. Idinagdag lang namin ito dahil nga kailangan nyo siya sa paggawa ng test later on. Okay, that's why idinagdag lang dito. But there's a different prof ed subject that will teach you and guide you on how to state your learning outcomes or learning objectives. Do you guys have questions? Are you still there? At ako nandito pa ako. Baka gusto yung pagalawin niyang baso. Kung nandyan pa kayo. Or delayed? Delayed ba? That's why some of you are not answering. Hi everyone. So, andito pa daw, sabi ni Steve Guzman. Hi Steve. So, may tanong ba kayo? Parang walang sumasagot. Feeling ko yung iba binuksan lang. Tapos nagluluto na ng kanin, tsaka ulam. None. So it says there none so far. Okay, that's good to hear. So like what I said, if you have questions or if you would like to share an experience that has something to do with what I am discussing, you can do so. Okay? And parang gusto nyo makita naman ako. Yan. Wala naman daw. Okay. So looks like you guys do not have any question. And then ito, i-discuss lang natin din, not, because these ones will be discussed later in some parts of our course, ano? So dito papasadahan lang natin. And now we proceed to the classification or the taxonomy of educational objectives. Now, why am I discussing this at this part of the course? Because this is also important later on for you to understand some topics in designing a table of specification, designing a test question. So, importante rin itong mga ito. All right, so the development of learners' knowledge and skills must be holistic. That is, the focus should not only be toward mind or intellectual abilities. It must also embrace the development of interests, attitudes, values, appreciation, and acquisition of manipulative motor skills. Okay? So sinasabi dito na holistic dapat yung development ng isang learner. Okay? So we kung napapansin ninyo, kung maalala ninyo, meron ng lumang kasabihan na ano ba 'yun? Educated but not something like that. I forgot that. So in other words, hindi lang dapat natin turuan yung mga estudyante natin ng mga concepts. Okay? Kailangan i-develop din natin yung kanilang attitudes and values. Okay? And also yung kanilang manipulative motor skills. Diyan natin masasabi that we are developing the students holistically. And ako, sa aking educational goals, isa yan sa gusto kong i-develop, to develop my students holistically. That's why sometimes I get frustrated when my students are misbehaving, because especially, halimbawa, ilang sems na kayo na magkakasama, nagmi-misbehave pa rin sila. That's really frustrating on the part of the student, the teacher, because you want to develop them holistically, but it seems that nothing is really happening to them. They are not transforming. They are not learning. They are not responding to your efforts in developing their values and attitudes. So minsan nakaka-frustrate yon. You'll know how it feels when you become a teacher. Okay. Yeah, educated but not well-mannered. Pwede rin yan, Pauline, si Pauline sabi niya, yung hindi ko maalala kanina, educated but not well-mannered. Schooled. Many are schooled but not educated. Yun. Yun yung ibig sabihin. So, yun yung iniisip ko kanina. Alright. Pero pwede rin ito, no? Wala siya, not educated but not well-mannered, okay? And yeah, so going back to what I am saying, so it's kind of frustrating on your part. So when you will become a teacher, especially when you teach later in the basic education, matetest. Alam niyo yan kasi you were once a high school student. Naging elementary pupil kayo. So later, you'll find it funny and at the same time parang nostalgic, kasi parang yung gagawin sa inyo ng mga estudyante later ay parang ginawa mo noon sa teacher mo. So it's like seeing yourself doing what you used to do to yourself once you become a teacher. And that's the only time you'll understand bakit ganun yung teacher nyo noon once you become one. But of course, let's not wait for that to happen. Ano? Uh, Hindi naman ibig sabihin na kailangan maging teacher ka para ma-realize mo kung ano yung ginagawa ng teacher mo noon. You just have to trust your teachers. If they tell you things like this, if they call your attention, if they tell you, point out your mistakes and tell you that you should do better next time, then I think you have to take it positively and constructively. Kasi yun na, your teachers are trying their best to develop you holistically, to develop your interests, your attitudes, and values. Okay? So, itong classification taxonomy of educational objectives, tatlo. We have cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. Okay? So, when talk about cognitive domain, it refers to the development of intellectual abilities and skills. Okay? Usually has something to do with the workings of the mind. When we talk about affective, it refers to the development of interests, attitudes, values, and appreciation. And then psychomotor refers to acquisition of manipulative motor skills. So each of these domains is subdivided into categories. So may mga levels ito. Okay? Meron tayong levels of cognitive domain, levels of affective domain, levels of motorcycle, psychomotor, psychomotor domain. So there are levels. So each of these domains is subdivided into categories, and these categories begin with the relatively simple knowledge outcomes and progress through increasing complex levels of intellectual ability. So the taxonomy is vital in identifying the types of learning outcomes that should be considered when developing a comprehensive list of learning objective outcomes for classroom instruction. So you will notice that learners' knowledge and skills progresses from one level to the other level. Okay, so may tanong dito, what happens to the teaching learning process if the teacher comes to class without setting or his or her lesson objectives? Okay, so it's like going on a trip without you setting your where to go, without you knowing where to go, what to do in the trip. Okay? And, well, pag pinag-usapan, medyo hindi magandang comparison kasi pag trip, when you go on a trip, maganda yung spontaneous, sabi nila. But what I'm trying to tell you is that you will spend a lot of time figuring out where to go, what to do, and how much time you're going to spend in that area pag hindi mo siya plinano. Same is true with teaching. If you teach without a lesson objective, para kang pumupunta sa classroom na hindi mo alam kung ano ang gagawin mo. Dapat meron ka palaging objectives, before you go to class. You should know, ano ba ang mangyayari ngayon? Ano ba ang gusto kong ma-achieve ng mga estudyante ko ngayon? So, knowing that in mind, you will work all throughout the time allotted to you to discuss that lesson to achieve those objectives. Okay? So that's how important learning objectives are. Kaya nasa first part siya eh. You have to set the objectives first, what you want your students to learn or to acquire, what skills you want them to acquire, para alam mo kung paano mo i-design yung iyong lesson, okay? Ano yung flow, and you will know how you're going to assess them. Okay? All right. So first year, which is the main focus of assessment and learning 1, itong cognitive domain. So the cognitive domain has 3 hierarchical levels. Okay, pag sinabi nating hierarchical or hierarchical of knowledge and skills, ibig sabihin merong mababa hanggang mataas siya because we are talking about levels. So here, there are 2 versions of the Bloom's taxonomy. itong Bloom Taxonomy, itong 1956, so ang nasa baba, the lowest level would be knowledge, then paakyat tayo, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Now, in 2001, binago nila ito, pinagbaliktad nila yung evaluation and synthesis, and they changed the name. Actually, ngayon, hindi na remember, understand remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Yun na yung nakalagay. Okay, so ito yung levels of the cognitive domain. And this is the one we're using now. Okay? Paano ba yung pinagsasabi mo? Dito nga, sabi natin kanina, when we talk about, ito yung hierarchy ng cognitive domain. So, gagamitin natin ito kapag tayo ay gagawa ng objectives, o magsiset ng objectives natin. Okay? The lowest level is remembering. So, dun sa unang example natin kanina is to define fractions. That's remembering because you only have to define fractions. So, you memorize what fraction is, so you can define what fraction is. That's the lowest. And most of the time, we do not want to produce graduates, especially sa college, who can only memorize, who memorizes things. Because in the actual world, hindi naman kailangan mag-memorize sa actual world. Meron tayong kailangan ma-develop, yung galing. We should know how to reason out. We should know how to make sound judgment. Okay? We should know how to analyze. We should know how to put the concepts into action. Or we should know how to apply them. That's why most of the time, dito sa upper level, dyan yung ganyang klase ng objective yung ginagawa ng mga teachers natin na nilalagay nila sa lessons nila. But of course, we cannot do away from remembering kasi before you can apply something, you need to know that something. So for example, you need to know what fraction is before you can actually solve problems involving fraction. Okay? So, yun. These are all important, pero meron siyang level. Okay. So, yun lang yung ibig sabihin yan. Alright, so the lowest level, the first level would be remembering or knowledge level. The remembering or knowledge level is the first level of thinking skills, which emphasizes the recall of previously learned material. So this may involve the recall of wide range of material, from specific facts to complete theories, but primarily to bring to mind the appropriate information. It includes learning outcomes related to knowledge of specifics, such as terminology and facts, okay, dealings with conventions, trends and sequences, classifications and categories, criteria and methodology, and ano po ba to? Principles, generalization, theories, and structures. So basically, you are just recalling, okay, or memorizing things under this level, okay, sa remembering. Okay, example, to identify the first president of the country, diba? So if you identify the first president of the country, so you just need to recall who is the first president of the country. You don't need to explain who is the first president of the country. Yeah. So sabi dito, state the properties of real numbers. If I'm going to state the properties of real numbers, I will just have to tell kung ano yung mga properties na yun. But I'm not going to explain them. I'm not going to show an example of those properties. Okay? Or I'm not going to show how will they be used. All right, then enumerate the kinds of triangles. I'm going to enumerate the different kinds of triangle, obtuse triangle, equilateral triangle, but I'm not going to define them. I'm not going to solve problems involving these triangles. State the different parts of speech, to enumerate the different automotive tools, to state the vision and mission of a university. Okay, so knowledge does not end in this level. We now proceed to the next level of the cognitive domain. So I hope guys, clear. Meron tayong specific part na pag-aaralan pa rin natin ito ulit. Okay? But I'm just giving you an idea of what this level is and how you're going to state your objectives under this level. Okay. Importante no, na maklasify natin kung nasaang level yung mga learning objectives natin. Bakit? Dahil gagamitin natin yan sa paggawa ng tests. Meron tayong tinatawag na table of specification. And sa table of specification, i-categorize natin kung anong level ng cognitive domain magfo-fall yung assessment objective natin. Okay? Now we have understanding or comprehension level. Check ko lang. Okay, let me see. Wait lang ah. I'm just checking if I'm still on. Because sometimes I'm talking on live and hindi na pala ako on. All right, so we have understanding. The second level of thinking skills provides the ability to grasp or understand the meaning of materials. This may be shown by translating materials from one form to another, words or numbers, by interpreting materials, explaining or summarizing, and by predicting future trends, consequences, or effects. Thus, learning outcomes of this level relate to translation, interpretation, prediction of materials. So these learning outcomes go one step beyond the simple remembering or recall of materials and represent the lowest level of understanding. So dun sa una kanina, we just recall, ano, remember, like remember the theories, definitions, categories, kinds, types, and stuff like that. Dito, medyo level up ng konti. We are already explaining things in our own words. We summarize, okay, and interpret and predict. So for example, to interpret a graph showing the population density of the world. Okay. So, ipapakita doon yung population density ng world, then you're going to interpret kung aling bansa ang pinakamarami ng population, alin yung kokonti. Okay. Then, discuss different kinds of triangles according to shapes. So, kanina, under the lowest level, we just state or identify the different kinds of triangles. Now, sa second level natin, sa understanding, we discuss the different kinds of triangles already according to their shapes. Okay? So, from the definition of each triangle siguro or description of each triangles, we can now discuss the different triangles considering their shapes. And another example is to estimate an outcome after a period of time based on existing data. So in other words, there's like data given to you, and then you're going to make an estimation of what would be the outcome based from that data. So dito hindi na lang siya simple recall. Ano? So how you understand what you will memorize, what you memorize, for example, would fall under this level. So kung explain, halimbawa, explain the water cycle. Kasi yung water cycle, pwede nating ma-memorize yun eh. We can actually draw the cycle on a sheet of paper, but it's a different level when you can explain it. So that would fall under understanding. Okay, then we have the third, which is applying. It refers to the ability to use learned material in new and concrete situations. This may include the application of things as rules, methods, concepts, principles, laws, and theories. The learning outcomes at this level relate to the use of abstraction in particular situations. So for example, construct charts and graphs. So you can now apply your knowledge on constructing charts and graphs. Then to apply, so the word there is to apply the steps in baking cake. So, ano ba? yung teacher ninyo, pinakita kung paano mag-bake ng cake. So, pinakita yung mga major steps in baking a cake. So, memorize mo kung ano yung mga steps. And then you can explain each step. And now it's high time to apply that in baking a cake. Kuha niyo? So to perform, another example is to perform the fundamental steps in automotive. So again, you put what you have learned into action. Fundamental steps in automotive. So that is applying. All right. So let me see if you guys can follow. Ayan. Meron mga comments pala dito. Sorry. Si Alan, sabi niya, it's like going into a war na hindi ka prepared. So, yun siguro yun kanina kasi I think I was talking about that earlier. But I'm sorry, ngayon ko lang nakita kasi I'm using two windows here. So, I cannot immediately see your comments. All right, so yeah. Shall we guys proceed? Just let me know if you can still follow or if I'm doing this fast. Because I think I only gave myself an hour and it's been over an hour. Okay, so let's proceed to analyzing. Analyzing is the fourth level of thinking skills. So it refers to the ability to break down materials into its component parts so that its organizational structure may be understood. This may include the identification of parts, analysis of relationship between parts, and recognition of the organizational principles involved. So learning outcomes under this level represent higher intellectual level than comprehension or understanding and application level because they require an understanding of both content and the structural form of the material. So learning objectives therefore in this level relate to breaking a whole into parts and distinguishing elements, relationship, and organizational principles. So this is a higher in terms of level as compared to the previous three dahil this is not just merely applying already what you have learned, it involves analysis, okay, like breaking a whole into parts and distinguishing, like what it says here, elements, relationship, and organizational principles. Example is to deduce facts from a hypothesis. So, di ba? So for you to be able to deduce facts from a hypothesis, it requires analysis. Okay, breaking that hypothesis into pieces and then making relationships or organizational principles. Okay, so to solve problems involving addition of like and dislike fractions. Okay, nakita nyo bakit to solve yan? To solve din kanina. Pwede, no? The verb may appear in two or more levels, pero depende kung paano nakastate yung objectives natin. So dito, pag sinabing to solve problems involving addition of like and dislike fractions, so this would require analysis, okay, knowing which are like and dislike fractions. You know? So you need to know kung alin muna dyan ang dislike fractions, like fractions, and then once you identify that, you can proceed with solving the problem. Okay, so may higher level siya, may analysis. To distinguish between facts and inferences. Now, for you to be able to distinguish facts and inferences, you have to break this down into small pieces, small details, itong facts and inferences. And from there, makikita mo kung ano yung kanila pagkakaiba. Okay? How will you distinguish if it's a fact or it's just an inference? Okay? So that's analysis. So medyo higher level ang required dito. And most of the time, ito yung binibigay sa atin lalong-lalo na sa tertiary level. Okay, analysis. Okay, minsan ayaw nyo, no? So that's how knowledge progresses. So from the first level kanina up to analyzing. And now we proceed to creating or synthesis level. This level is the fifth in the taxonomy of educational objectives. This thinking skills refers to the ability, to put parts together to form a new whole. This may involve the production of a unique communication, theme or speech, a plan of operation like a research proposal, or set of abstract relation or scheme of classifying information. Learning outcomes in this area stresses creative behavior with major emphasis on the formulation of new patterns or structures. Learning objective outcomes relate to putting parts together in a new form, such as unique communication, a plan of operation, a set of abstract relations. So, dun sa isa kanina, you break them into parts. Dito naman, you put parts together. Okay. So, creating, of course, yung mga word natin dito, from what you have learned, based from how you understand the concepts, now you're going to put this into action and you're going to create something like a project or a piece of art maybe where that art reflects of what you have learned. Okay, example, to produce an original piece of art. Okay, to write a poem. So maybe you're going to write a poem because your teachers taught you about vocabularies being used in a poem, okay, or anything related to writing. To write a short story. So say, meron kayong diniscuss, like about environment maybe, and your teacher would tell you to use what you have learned there in writing a short story that has something to do with environmental protection. Okay. Then construct a miniature of a particular building. Okay. This, for example, pag tinuro ka sa inyo paggawa ng mga models, or parts of a building siguro. I do not know. To design my future wedding gown. Okay. Mali yung my future wedding gown. Sorry. Wedding there. Kasi her. Hindi pwede. Paano pag lalaki, ano? So, dapat to design a wedding gown. Medyo may mali doon. So, yan. So, design a wedding gown siguro. Nasa level ito, yung ginawa nyo previously, ay paano mag-design, paano magtabas, paano mag anong tawag dito? Mag-knit or mag-diet. So, okay, 'yan. So, 'yun yung mga una niyong ginawa and then this time you put all those things together and then you're going to make a gown. Yun. Then you create a unique basket out of indigenous materials. So, higher na namang level ito. So, we progress to another higher level, which is creating. And then we have evaluating. This is the highest level of thinking skills, which provides the ability to judge the value of a material, like statement, novel, poem, research report for a given purpose. The judgments are to be based on definite criteria. This may be internal criteria or external criteria. And the learner may determine the criteria are to be given them. Learning outcomes in this area are highest in the cognitive hierarchy because they contain the elements of all other categories plus value judgment based on clearly defined criteria. So because once this objective is attained, it is understood that the student applied all 5 categories from remembering to creating. So this is indeed the highest level of complexity and includes objective outcomes related to judging in terms of internal evidence or logical consistency and external evidence or consistently with facts developed elsewhere. So for example, recognize fallacies in an argument. So dito, we are making judgment already. Okay? So, Sobrang highest level na ito. So, you will not be able to recognize fallacies in an argument, pag you do not know the criteria of what makes a fallacy is. Okay. So, magkakaroon na ng i-evaluate mo na yung argument based from what you have previously learned on dito sa lower level na cognitive na domain natin. Sabi nga dito, it incorporates the other 5 categories. So once na ma-reach mo at kaya mong sagutin ang mga tanong under evaluation or evaluating level, ibig sabihin na-meet mo yung first 5 levels, first 5 categories, ano? That's why highest level ito. Now, to assess the project outputs of students using rubrics or criteria. So, if you can already assess the project outputs of your fellow students using a given criteria, so ibig sabihin, you already have a very, very outstanding understanding of whatever is related to that project output. Ano? So, hindi mo yan ma-evaluate kapag hindi mo napagdaanan yung first 5. Hindi mo na-achieve yung first 5 levels of the cognitive domain. So for example, may mga essay minsan yung teachers na tinatanong sa inyo, and ang mga tanong is, if you were, halimbawa, if you were the teacher, would you do the same? Halimbawa, may binigyan kayo ng situation. Then may tanong sa last, if you were the teacher, would you do the same? Why? So that's already evaluating, okay? Because you are evaluating the situation given in the test and align it with what you have learned, and then you're going to write an essay about that. So that's making judgment already or evaluating the situation. Now, you cannot do that kapag hindi mo, if you cannot, let's say, apply the concept, you cannot remember the concept, you cannot explain the concept, okay? You cannot create something out of that, the concept which was discussed to you, okay? So it would be hard for you then to make an evaluation in the given example which I just mentioned, right? So those are the levels of the cognitive domain. Now, sabi ko, ito yung focus ng assessment in learning. One, because when you will be designing your tests, ika-categorize nyo yung bawat question doon sa test ninyo kung saang level ng cognitive domain sila magfo-fall. Because that is very important, okay, in designing a test question. And also important in designing your lesson plans, or modules for that matter, okay? So it's been over an hour. I think I consumed a lot this time. So maybe I'm going to schedule another live broadcast next week. Okay, so I'll just let you know when. So before I end this, let me know if you guys have questions. If you do not have questions, please let me know too. So I would know if I'm going to end this live discussion now or explain further. So yeah. Questions? If you have no questions, let me know let me know so I could end this live. I think medyo delay, So yeah. So Redeline says none. Joanne also. By the way, guys, kung nahihiya kayong magtanong dito sa live natin, we have our GC. So, pwede kayong magtanong doon. Any time of the day, kahit 12 midnight, 1 a.m., paggising ko, sasagutin ko kayo kaagad. Basta hindi brown out. At okay ang Wi-Fi connection natin. Okie dokie. So I think uh, you guys do not have any questions. So I think that concludes our lecture discussion for today. So for those of you who joined me and not enrolled in my class, I'd like also to thank you for sticking around. So yeah, that's it for today. I'll see you again next time. Like what I said, just leave a question in our group chat. So that's all for today. Bye, guys.